The quietest person in the room isn't shy. They're watching you. And by the time you realize it, they already know who you are. There's always someone like this. They don't fight for attention. They don't rush to speak. They sit slightly back and let the room unfold. One question, maybe two, then silence again. And most people, they never notice them. That's the first mistake. Because we've been trained to notice noise. The loudest voice. The fastest response. The person who fills every gap in conversation. We assume presence means power. But sometimes presence is just performance. And performance is loud. It needs validation. It needs reactions. It needs to be seen. That's why most people talk. Not because they have something to say, but because silence feels uncomfortable. Silence exposes you. It gives people time to think, to observe, to notice things you didn't mean to show. And that's exactly where the quiet person lives. In that space, where everyone else feels uneasy. While everyone else is trying to be understood, they're trying to understand. Who hesitated before answering? Who forced confidence? Who smiled but didn't mean it? Who changed their tone mid-sentence? Who avoided eye contact just for a second too long? These are small things, almost invisible, but together they tell a story. And here's the part most people never realize. You can't see this when you're performing. The moment you start thinking about how you sound, how you look, how you're being perceived, you stop processing reality. Your attention turns inward, and the outside world, it becomes blurry. But the quiet one, they're not distracted. They're not rehearsing their next sentence. They're not chasing approval. They're free. Free to observe. Free to connect patterns. Free to see what's actually happening beneath the surface. And every room is leaking information. Constantly. People reveal themselves long before they speak the truth. In posture. In timing. In hesitation. In the way their energy shifts when certain topics come up. Most people miss this because they're busy being someone. But the observer isn't trying to be anyone. And that changes everything. Because over time, those small observations stop being random. They become patterns. Across conversations. Across days. Across different people. And slowly, without even realizing it, the quiet person builds something most people never develop. Clarity. Not surface-level understanding. Real clarity. The ability to look at someone and know what they're not saying. To hear words and feel the intention behind them. To notice when something doesn't match. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You start noticing the difference between confidence and performance. Between agreement and silent resentment. Between honesty and hesitation. And here's what makes it powerful. You don't need time anymore. You don't need long explanations. You see it almost instantly. You've felt this before. That strange, uncomfortable moment. When someone understands you before you fully explained yourself. It feels exposing. Like they skipped steps. Like they saw something you weren't ready to show yet. That's not luck. That's pattern recognition. Built in silence. Paid off in seconds. Now let me show you exactly how this works. Because most people think observation is passive. They think it just happens. Like you sit quietly and somehow absorb everything. That's not it. Real observation is active. It's intentional. It's disciplined. The quiet person has developed something most people never train. Selective attention. While others scatter their focus across everything, the observer locks onto what matters. They're not watching everything. They're watching the right things. The slight pause before someone answers a difficult question. The way a person's body language changes when their ego gets challenged. The difference between someone who's listening and someone who's just waiting to talk. The moment energy shifts in a room before anyone says a word. These aren't random details. These are signals. And once you learn to read them, every conversation becomes a different kind of experience. You stop hearing just words. You start hearing what people mean, what they want, what they're afraid to say. And this is where it gets interesting. Because most people go through entire relationships, entire careers, entire lives, never developing this skill. They hear, but they don't listen. They look, but they don't see. And the ones who do develop it, they move through the world differently. I've seen this in real rooms. The loudest person speaks first, fills the silence, tries to control the direction, and for a moment it works. People listen. They react. They follow. But the quiet one, they wait. They let everything unfold. They collect information. They connect dots no one else is even looking at. And then they speak. And when they do, everything shifts. Not because they said more, because they said what mattered, at the exact right moment. That's the difference. Noise reacts. Silence calculates. Think about the most respected people you know. Not the most popular. Not the loudest. The most respected. There's almost always something calm about them. Something unhurried. Like they're never scrambling for words. Like they already know something you don't. That's not an accident. That's what years of observation builds. It builds patience. The ability to wait without anxiety. To let situations develop without forcing outcomes. To trust that if you watch long enough, the truth always reveals itself. And it builds something else too. Something most people spend their whole lives chasing. Confidence. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that needs the room to validate it. The quiet kind. The kind that comes from knowing. Really knowing. People. Situations. Patterns. Because when you've spent years reading rooms, you stop being surprised by people. You stop being caught off guard. You stop reacting to everything. And that steadiness, that's what people feel when they're around you. They can't explain it, but they trust it. This is what people misunderstand about being quiet. They think it's weakness, lack of confidence, lack of intelligence, lack of presence. But real silence is controlled. It's intentional. It's selective. It's knowing that you don't need to say everything, just the right thing, at the right time. And over time, this creates something rare, an unfair advantage, because while everyone else is trying to be impressive, you're becoming accurate. You start seeing through people, through situations, through manipulation, through noise. And once you reach that point, you stop reacting to everything. You become harder to influence, harder to fool, harder to read. And that changes how people experience you. They can't figure you out, and that unsettles them. Because people are used to reading each other quickly. They're used to categorizing, labeling, deciding within seconds who someone is. But the quiet observer, they don't give enough away for that. And that creates a different kind of presence. Quiet but heavy. Subtle but undeniable. There's a reason the most dangerous players in any game are the ones you never see coming. Not because they hide, but because they never needed to announce themselves. They let others do the talking. They let others reveal everything, and they store it all, quietly, patiently, precisely. And when the moment comes, they're already 3 steps ahead. Not because they're smarter, because they listened when no one else did, because they watched when everyone else was performing, because they were present when everyone else was distracted. If you've always been the quiet one, you weren't falling behind. You were learning something most people never even realize exists. You weren't ignored. You were underestimated, and the people who underestimate you are usually the ones revealing the most. That's the irony. The people who think they understand the room are usually the ones talking. The ones who actually understand it almost never are, because understanding doesn't need attention. It needs awareness. That silence, it was never emptiness. It was observation. It was control. It was precision. And if this feels like you, then you already know. Most people will watch this and move on. They'll hear it, but they won't really see it. But a few will. A few will recognize themselves in this. Not in the noise, but in the silence. If that's you, you already belong here. Subscribe. Because here, we don't just watch behavior. We understand what people try to hide.